So let's consider quality. In particular, we're going to consider it in the context of television. So these are questions set by Will Garrood, who was previously the BBC's head of strategy. So initially he asks, what does quality mean for television? So if you're head of strategy for a large TV company, what does quality mean for you? How are you going to define it? Then secondly, what does that mean in terms of trade-offs? So consider all the points on where you're trading one thing off against another. And then finally, what does that mean for the rest of the market? The BBC is a national broadcaster. It's effectively government paid for, so it's not, if you like, in a competitive market, so there's some significant potential for market distortion. So those are the 3 points for you to consider, so spend some time going through all of those and then we'll talk about it. So maybe pause the video here. So what are the main answers given by Will? Well, he started off by suggesting, is it audience perception? If not, how do we measure quality? He personally proposed that audience view can only be part of it. There is also the question of production values. You can have very high quality production values, but a terrible show. And the third thing to consider is the risk of what he describes as cultural ossification. That means being too rigid, being too unimaginative. So when considering quality, one needs to consider audience perception, production values, and being unimaginative. So those are 3 key elements when looking at quality for TV. So in terms of what that means in trade-offs, he mentions, where does quality not matter? The BBC has a very diverse offer across TV, radio and the internet, and particularly some areas of the website, maybe quality is not important. They could be, as he says, mediocre, because quality is about the broader view, and when you start to drill down into some fine detail, somebody's really looking for something specific, you don't need to have at that level all the high production finish because somebody's there with a particular intent. Does high quality mean lower audiences? They may make shows with high production values that are maybe educational or about high culture, but will anyone watch? So there's a consideration there about what do people actually want and balancing that against these high quality or perceived quality shows. Is it necessarily expensive? Does quality in BBC parlance mean, well, we make fewer, bigger and better pieces? There's a challenge there because there's a lot of time to fill, and focusing down means you lose breadth. But this comes to another point. Does quality conflict with innovation in some way? As he says, new things are often rubbish. They take time to develop. So shows that they start maybe struggle to find their feet, but if you give them time and space, they develop and become good. Not all shows start off great, and you have to give them that space, and that means investment, and these are trade-offs you have to make. So considering the rest of the market, well, as a public organisation, they've got obligations not to crowd competition out. They're almost a monopoly in the UK. So also to consider where they're doing things well, they've then got to look, well, we're very successful at this, but can someone else do this better? And maybe we need to let another channel do it, and that must be a very tough decision to make. Here's a different example. This is a project going back to 2008 where we were working with many companies, but the ones you'd probably be aware of are Mercedes and BMW, looking at how can you build to order a car within 5 days. So somebody goes into the showroom or maybe online, configures a car, and then it's built to their specification and delivered to them within 5 days. If any of you have bought a car already, you'll know that process is currently taking, well, maybe 3 months. So initially, we needed to look at the network structure, how that order flows from the customer through the very deep supply chain all the way back to the parts suppliers and almost towards raw materials. And when we're looking at the quality of that, we're looking at the timings of each, and we really had to consider what we call the build to order, build to stock boundary. So which parts does it make sense to build to customer order, and which parts really should you just hold a stock of, and then you make those in large batches and supply them to the factory side. So that BTO BTS boundary is actually quite a big detailed consideration. And you've also got to look at the quality of parts that you're making, because this is a very complex network. It was a really interesting question. The next part was the product structure. We made the car modular, and you could see we've got a station wagon, a hatchback, the limo and the convertible variants of the car, all using a lot of shared parts. Then we had real demand data, and we used that to model the network structure and saw if we could build those different cars. And then we looked at the relationship between the different markets, where the factories might be placed, and if it was feasible to move the parts between these countries within the time and still achieve build to order. So it was all about quality, quality cost delivery, the very basics we had there, but really the modelling focused on, if you go back to that Fido's sand cone model, really focusing on quality, and only then could we build up to provide the flexibility and the speed. So that's the end of this seminar. Please see the other videos in the quality series.